Welcome to the Global News Podcast on YouTube, where we take a deeper look at one of the stories making the headlines. Hello, I'm Jannat Jalil, and today we're looking at why several countries, including Spain and Ireland, are boycotting next year's Eurovision Song Contest in protest at Israel's participation. And I'm joined on the line by our music correspondent, Mark Savage. Mark, this is supposed to be a joyous occasion, but now Eurovision is instead facing its biggest ever political crisis.
Yes, it does feel like the countries that make up Eurovision are in complete disarray over their varying positions on whether Israel should be part of the contest or not. And this is something that has been brewing for several years now, ever since the Hamas attacks on the 7th of October and Israel's subsequent invasion of Gaza. There have been protests outside the contest, both in the Swedish edition in 2024 and in Switzerland in 2025. And there were even protesters who tried to get up on the stage during this year's show and throw paint over the Israeli contestant Yuval Raphael. The countries who take part, some of them are very much in support of Israel being part of it, highlighting the fact that this is supposed to be a contest about unity and harmony between nations and not a political event. Germany, in fact, said that if anybody voted to exclude Israel from future contests, then it would pull out. But what we've had instead is a vote for Israel to remain, and several countries, including some of the most successful Eurovision nations of all time, saying they will boycott in Vienna in 2026.
And this boycott isn't just about Gaza, it's also about media freedom.
That's right. I mean, there's a couple of things going on here. One of the things that Israel was accused of at the 2025 contest was of trying to tip the scales in favour of their contestant. There was a government-funded campaign on social media and on YouTube to encourage people outside Israel to cast all 20 of the votes that were available to Israel's act. And that did seem to have some sort of influence. Yuval Raphael topped the public vote with more points than anybody else, whereas her song was not considered the best by the professional songwriting juries who take part in Eurovision and came somewhere more in the mid-table. The end result, when you combine those two votes, was that she came second. But Israel has often seen Eurovision as a way of promoting its image internationally, soft power, as you might call it. They present the best possible version of themselves on stage, as do most countries at Eurovision. I mean, look at the example of Ukraine following the Russian invasion. They really stepped up their game at Eurovision and used that as a way to try and get other countries on side. So the idea that Eurovision is free of politics is really not that true.
And those state broadcasters like Slovenia, which are boycotting next year's contest, they're saying if Russia could be barred after its full-scale invasion of Ukraine, then surely the same should apply to Israel, given the high level of deaths in Gaza since the war began.
That's right. That is their argument. And the EBU, which organises Eurovision, says it is sympathetic to that. But the real reason that Russia was kicked out of Eurovision a couple of years ago after invading Ukraine was that its state broadcaster had violated the terms and conditions of its membership. What the EBU says is that Can, which is the Israeli state broadcaster, has abided by the rules and has been a fair competitor at the contest for many years. Israel have won 4 times. And one of the concerns of people who support Israel's continuing presence in the competition is that Can is a broadcaster that is independent of the Israeli government. So there was a thought that perhaps if Israel was kicked out, it would threaten the independence and the future of that broadcaster, because already there have been calls for its funding to be cut or for it to be taken into state hands. There was a feeling that perhaps Eurovision was one of the things that was saving it from those terrible consequences that would threaten press freedom in Israel.
And what impact is this boycott likely to have, especially when it involves a country like Spain, which is one of the biggest sponsors of the contest?
Some of the statements that we heard following Israel's confirmation suggested that there isn't really an easy path back for a lot of these countries. Spain in particular, which had pushed for a vote on Israel being excluded, said they had lost faith in the management of the Eurovision Song Contest, and that Israel's attempts to politicise the event meant that it could no longer be neutral. It doesn't feel like that will be an easy thing to repair.
And the fact that the countries taking part in the boycott will also not be broadcasting the Eurovision contest as well as sending participants there, that's likely to have a big financial impact.
That's true. And I think, I think of the fans at a time like this, nobody who loves Eurovision wants to be excluded from watching it. And that is what seems is going to be the case in Spain, in the Netherlands, in Ireland. All of these countries who have pulled out won't be able to screen it. And as you say, there is a financial implication too, because every country that takes part contributes to the fee of staging the contest. Spain was one of the five biggest, although I have to say the number is not as big as you might expect. Spain's contribution to Eurovision is about €350,000 a year. So it's not a huge sum. And we think there will be about 35 countries taking part in Vienna in 2026. So if it's spread evenly between them, that's only about $10,000. It's not really that much when you consider the cost of putting on any standard episode of television. It feels like that financial impact will be kind of ameliorated by the fact so many countries have confirmed they will take part.
And Eurovision was partly created to help unite a continent that had been torn apart by the Second World War. So it's quite sad and quite poignant in a way, if you like. Coming up to its 70th birthday next year, it's now being torn apart by these divisions.
It is very sad. As someone who's been to the Eurovision many, many times, the atmosphere there is never about politics. It's never about pitting countries against countries. It's about musicians and artists showing the best that their country can offer. And, sometimes people think of the music as cheesy and tacky, and there's a lot of spandex and a lot of bare torsos. There's a lot of raven-haired women singing big ballads into a wind machine. But often what you find is people are channeling the folk music of their country, combining it with the pop sounds of the day, and trying to reach out beyond the borders of their country and say, this is what we have to offer culturally. So yeah, it is sad when that all fractures and when people are starting to use the contest for political means or to use it as a battering ram against governments. I understand the frustrations that fans have in that sense, but I also understand that some countries feel that it would be, as Ireland called it, unconscionable to share a stage with Israel when the loss of life in Gaza has been so high.
Given these deep divisions, can Eurovision recover? Can it reunite through music?
I do think one of the things we need to be clear about is that this is a big, big moment for Eurovision and that these are wounds that will take a long time to heal. But the competition is still going ahead. We think there's going to be more than 30 countries there. And although at the time we're recording this, 4 countries have left, we also know that 3 countries are rejoining. Bulgaria, Moldova, and Romania are coming back to the contest after a long period of absence. So actually, the net loss to Eurovision next year is only 1 country. I think what people will hope is that as the ceasefire in Gaza takes hold and hopefully there is some sort of resolution there, that a path back for these countries will start to emerge, maybe not in 2026 or 27, but further down the line.
Mark, thank you. That was our music correspondent, Mark Savage. And if you'd like to hear more international news stories, then please check out our Global News podcast from wherever you get your BBC News podcasts. And if you enjoyed this episode, please like and subscribe. And if there's any other issue that you'd like us to cover, then leave us a comment below. But that's it for now from this edition of the Global News podcast on YouTube.